Evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm feeling a little bit lucky as I settle in for a quick Facebook Live this evening because, unlike lots of parents at the moment, my little one seems to have adjusted to daylight savings okay, although I may have just jinxed myself by saying that out loud. Look, I thought before I get stuck into a few papers this evening, I would just stop in and share an update after Cabinet today. So many of you who have joined me before for a quick Facebook Live on a Monday evening will know. And on Monday afternoons, Cabinet, where all our ministers meet together and make decisions on a range of issues, and then afterwards I have something called the post-Cabinet press conference, which is always on a Monday afternoon, where I give a little bit of a rundown on those decisions and have a question and answer session with the media. So just in case you missed that, I thought I would share with you two of the updates today. The first is around something called self-isolation pilots. So many of you will remember before this latest outbreak that we've had of Delta in Auckland, in August, we held a forum called the Reconnecting New Zealand Forum. And that came off the back of advice that we commissioned from Professor David Skegg and a group of public health professionals. We asked them to answer a few questions for us as we sought to, in the new year, work towards reconnecting New Zealand to the world and reducing down some of the friction at our borders. How do we safely operate checks at our borders to ensure we don't have a large influx of COVID, that we keep ourselves safe, but it's a bit easier to come and go from New Zealand. So they did a piece of work for us that basically said, look, get everyone vaccinated, and then in the beginning of 2022, you can start to do things differently. As part of that work, we worked with them on the idea of piloting some of those new ways of doing things. And one of the things we wanted to pilot was how we can safely have people isolate at home, because we know one of the friction points we have at the moment is our capacity to safely isolate people in managed isolation. And we know that's caused issues. So we do want to create an alternate way to do things. So today we announced that we would start that pilot through the months of October through to December. Now it'll be small at first, and that's because A, we want to get the settings right, and B, while we're vaccinating New Zealanders, we want to be careful. But once we've established how those settings can work, then it's something that we can use more widely in the new year. So we'll have roughly 150 people take part in it. We'll be working with employers, with individuals who need to work for business purposes. And the reason, go overseas for business purposes, and the reason we've defined it in that way in the beginning is simply so that we have more than just us with skin in the game. We've got employers who are willing to help us with compliance and so on, just to ensure it's done safely. Now, that won't be the criteria we use when we use it more broadly. Of course, we'll then open it up beyond just the private sector at that point. But while we're vaccinating people and while we need to do it safely, that's one of the criteria that we'll use. You'll need to be a New Zealand citizen or resident, and you'll need to be fully vaccinated. And of course, we'll have compliance checks, checking that you're staying at your home. You won't be able to isolate with other people other than those you've travelled with. Lots of checks and balances to make sure it can be safely done. So we'll be announcing all of the details around how it will work on Wednesday, expressions of interest then open on Thursday, and we'll take those through to the 8th of October, and then those who'll participate, we'll let them know after that. So that's a little bit on the self-isolation pilot, and just gives you a sense of how we want to do things differently once we've got broader vaccinations around New Zealand. The other thing that we'll look to do over time is, as we're able to, is look at shortening isolation requirements. At the moment, we run the full 14 days because all of the evidence suggests that's the safest option. But we've been looking to vary up our testing regime and our managed isolation facilities to see how many of the cases that we do come through in those first 5 days, just to give us a bit more of an evidence base around shortened isolation periods as well. So the second thing that we also announced is that we've been working for some time on bespoke arrangements for low-risk countries like Vanuatu, Tonga and Samoa, who have managed their borders really carefully and through quarantine arrangements, and also the fact that people travel onwards into those countries through other countries have done a fantastic job of keeping COVID out. And so our horticultural sector usually run employment programs that have people coming in from those countries in order to work in New Zealand. And I've been very keen that we're able to re-establish those without putting pressure on our quarantine system. So what we've worked through with each of those countries is an arrangement that allows that workforce to come in and quarantine at their place of employment. So they'll have to have at least one shot of the vaccination, and then we'll complete vaccinations here. They have to have a day 0 test and then a day 5 test, and then they'll be able to work freely from there. So it's a bespoke arrangement that demonstrates just the fact that we're willing to look at doing things differently at the border, and we'll look to do more of that once we have more New Zealanders who are vaccinated. Really interesting today to see as well some of the survey work across some of the surveys and poll results from New Zealanders, asking them when they expect us to change up those border settings, and there does seem to be good consensus around having good levels of protection domestically before we see large-scale changes, and that's certainly what we've been working to. But we want to be prepared, which is why we're running this pilot this year. You'll see in Australia they're doing something similar, and with similar numbers as well. So they're not large over there either. I think in New South Wales it's 170 people that they're running theirs. So this gives us a good insight into formulating a bit of a plan that makes it a bit easier in the future. So those were just a couple of things I wanted to give you an update on. Unfortunately, I've done a terrible job of reading today as I'm talking to you, but next time perhaps I will do a little bit more multitasking, and I'll be able to read your comments as we go. So otherwise, I really hope everyone's looking after themselves out there. Glenn, I think actually that one I can catch. You've just asked why not all police officers are currently vaccinated. A good chunk are, actually. My last check is that the majority have had at least their first shot, but you're asking because they're standing on our borders. They, of course, wear PPE as well. So you'll see police officers off with N95 masks, which is, top of the range when it comes to protective equipment for them when working on our borders and so on. But equally at the same time, of course, they've had vaccines that they have available to them, and the vast majority, as I recall, have had at least a first dose. Tony, would you like to talk about something other than COVID? Love to. I think we'd all like to talk about something other than COVID. Tony, it's just the fact that it's what I get a lot of questions on, and so try and make sure I answer people's questions. But if anyone wants to ask me about anything other than that, you'd be most welcome to, and I will do my best to reply. In fact, as it happens, we've got a number of announcements this week that aren't just COVID related. We've got Minister Carmel Cepoloni announcing changes to ACC to cover off birth injuries this week. We've got Minister Calvin Davis talking about his work on oranga tamariki, responding to some of the work we've been doing to make sure that kids in care are safe. We've got housing announcements this week as well, so lots still going through, and I'll give updates on those as we go. So, thank you, Sam. Yes, I am. Thank you, Sam, for saying something positive about the fact I'm wearing a hoodie. I have received a little bit of negative feedback for my casual attire on Facebook Lives before, so thank you for not giving me a hard time for wearing a hoodie. All right, everyone. Thank you very, very much for joining me today. Simon, you've decided to ask me a non-COVID related question. You've asked steak and cheese or mince and cheese. So I'm going to finish on that note. I'm a classic mince and cheese person. So just displaying there my Morrinsville College canteen roots, which I know you appreciate. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for joining me this evening. I'll jump back online sometime soon and I'll make sure I mix it up with some COVID and non-COVID related news. Till then, look after yourselves. Ka kite.